Chase Elliott made a valiant effort but could not catch his teammate Kyle Larson. Larson ties Denny Hamlin for the regular season points lead as he adds to his playoff point total. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. It's good to be back, race review edition. Talking about all things Watkins Glen, NASCAR returns to the Finger Lakes for the first time in 2 years. Once again, Hendrick Motorsports finishes 1-2. The Penske cars take each other out. Larson and Bell make contact. Lots to get to today, but first, this episode is sponsored by Avalon King, makers of Armor Shield 9. Armor Shield 9 is the highest rated DIY ceramic coating on the planet. It rejects UV rays, surface scratches, road grime, mud, pollen, acid rain, and much, much more. They sent me some to experiment with on my own car, and I gotta say, I do notice the difference. Like even simple things like raindrops just roll right off the surface up over the windshield. It's really, really cool actually. It's super easy to apply and you will notice a clear difference. So check them out. That's Armor Shield 9 made by Avalon King. Click the link down in the description to get some for yourself. Thank you to Avalon King for sponsoring this episode of Out of the Groove. It's so good to be back talking about a NASCAR Cup Series race once again. You know, I didn't mind the 2-3 week break at first. I get it, NBC wants to show the Olympics. It happens every 4 years. But after that first week or so, I felt lost. I didn't know how to spend my weekends without stock car racing. Well, this weekend NASCAR action returned in a big, big way. ARCA on Friday, Trucks and Xfinity yesterday, and the Cup Series here today. Watkins Glen has always been my favorite road course on the NASCAR schedule. I mean, for many years there were only two. It was between Watkins Glen and Sonoma. I always preferred Watkins Glen. The Roval's been pretty exciting, but I still have a soft spot for the Glen. Road America was cool this year. COTA, despite the rain, was still pretty neat. I'm excited for the Indy road course next week, but I still love me some Watkins Glen, and I really missed it last year when NASCAR had to skip this weekend because of COVID. Great to see racing return to the Glen. Let's talk about what happened in this race. So before we talk about what happened in the race, there was some drama in the inspection line. Arguably the two best road course teams all year long faced serious penalties before the green flag even dropped. Both Chase Elliott and Christopher Bell were forced to start at the rear of the field. Both teams were docked 10 driver owner points. Both crew chiefs were suspended for this race, and both teams were fined $25,000. According to Bob Pockrass, they failed inspection multiple times due to an issue with the rear window air deflectors. Both Chase Elliott and Christopher Bell started this race in a deep, deep hole, and both drivers managed to dig themselves out of it for the most part. They both got a sniff of the lead at some point in this race. Overall, this was a fairly clean and green Watkins Glen race, but one race team that seemed to be at the center of nearly every major incident was Team Penske. Early on in this race, Brad Keselowski, who started on the pole, wheel hopped, got loose, and spun out all on his own just 2 turns before taking the competition caution. He got intimidated perhaps by his teammate Joey Logano. Later in the race, Keselowski spun out going into turn 1, or didn't spin out completely, but a pretty aggressive power slide. Sounded like he was having issues with his brakes all day long. Ryan Blaney, his Penske teammate, also spun out early in the race in the bus stop area, so it was not just a Brad Keselowski issue. It seemed like maybe Blaney had an issue as well. Keselowski wasn't done. Later in the race, again going into turn 1, he seemed to wheel hop, locked up the tires, and took out his teammate Joey Logano. It was not a good day for Brad Keselowski or Team Penske. Now, Joey Logano did win stage 1, so an important playoff point there, but then things went downhill pretty quickly. Stage 2 went to Martin Truex Jr., who coming into this race had finished in the top 2 in 3 straight Watkins Glen races. Important playoff point for him, but also happening in stage 2, Chase Elliott locked up the tires going into turn 1, smoked them big time, flat spotted his tires, and had to make an unscheduled pit stop. He was trying to work his way up through the field quickly, got it a little too hot, had to pit out of sequence, lost a ton of track position. That really put Chase Elliott behind compared to the rest of the leaders. He'd done a pretty good job up to that point of working his way through the field methodically despite having to start at the rear, but having to go to the rear for a second time pretty much really hurt his chances of winning today. But he almost dug himself out of that hole. That's about as deep of a hole as you can possibly be in. Crew chief suspended, starting at the rear, flat spot the tires midway through the race, have to go back to the rear, and yet somehow in the closing laps It was all about Chase Elliott. Could he chase down Kyle Larson for the win? Before we get to that though, the beginning of stage 3 was quite eventful. Martin Truex Jr. trying to hold off his teammate Christopher Bell, who also had to start at the rear but didn't flat spot the tire, so he made up track position, got to the front of the field. Bell won at the Daytona road course earlier this year. He was battling with his teammate Truex, even got alongside him briefly at one point, put an aggressive block on Kyle Larson, who was also a part of that 3-car battle. They went back and forth, took some shots at each other for several laps when, unfortunately, Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell made contact going into turn 1. Bell goes spinning around, fell back to, I believe, 10th place. Kyle Larson actually took the blame for this incident in his post-race interview, and I think that's quite sportsmanlike of him because I don't think that all falls on Kyle Larson's shoulders. He was not fully alongside Christopher Bell, no, but he had more than his full nose. He had the whole front half of his car inside of Bell going into turn 1, and Christopher Bell did not give Larson much space. Larson was down pretty much on the rumble strips, on the inside curbing. Bell had him pinned all the way down there, and Larson at that point, there was no way he was going to be able to make the corner without getting into Bell a little bit. So I don't think Christopher Bell gave him a lot of room. The folks watching on TV, the announcers seem to make that same observation, but sure, you could argue Kyle Larson was trying to take up some space that maybe he hadn't fully earned just yet. So maybe 50-50. I think upon first viewing, I thought it was mostly on Christopher Bell, not giving Larson much room, but after hearing Larson's comments, all right, maybe Larson was being a little over aggressive and Bell was, just trying to squeeze him down. They're just trying to defend his position the best way possible. Either way, Christopher Bell ended up getting spun out. Kyle Larson maintained his spot in second place. In the final round of green flag pit stops, Kyle Larson came out ahead of Martin Truex Jr., so kudos to the 5 team. They got it done on pit road. Truex then could never catch Kyle Larson. The story became Chase Elliott, who'd worked his way somehow back up to 3rd, 10 seconds behind the leaders. Could Chase Elliott in about 20-21 laps run down Kyle Larson, make up, again, more than 10 seconds? I don't think anyone thought that was realistic without the help of a caution, but then Chase Elliott put together a couple fantastic laps. He gained 6/10, 7/10, and then a full second on Larson, 3 laps in a row. Got down to within 6-7 seconds, and then he caught Martin Truex Jr., and they battled for a couple laps. That hurt Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott ultimately got the lead down to under 5 seconds. Really, until about the last 8 or 9 laps, there was a realistic shot that Chase Elliott was going to be able to run down Kyle Larson. He obviously was using his tires, using his car way more aggressively than Larson was in those closing laps, so I think eventually Elliott's tires just went away. He got the lead down to 2 seconds at one point when Larson got held up in some heavy lap traffic briefly, but 2 seconds was the closest he ever got. He never had a chance to make a real move on Kyle Larson. Still, an impressive effort by Chase Elliott. There's a reason this guy's won the last 2 Watkins Glen races in a row. There's a reason this guy has won 7 road courses in his young career. He is, for some reason, a fantastic road course racer. I mean, he'll admit it. He's not even entirely sure why he's so good at road courses. It's just something that seems to come really naturally to him. Chase Elliott felt like the story in the closing laps, but it was Kyle Larson ultimately getting his 5th win, series-leading 5th win, and actually now career-high 5th win of the season. A 1-2 finish for Hendrick. This is Larson's 2nd road course win of the year. He also won at Sonoma a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. He continues to add to his playoff point total, and actually, he now is tied with Denny Hamlin for the regular season points lead. Remember, the regular season champion 3 weeks from now will get 15 additional playoff points. So Larson and Hamlin still have a ton to fight for. And talking about the playoff cut line, it's really between Tyler Reddick and his teammate Austin Dillon for that final spot, barring of course another surprise winner. Tyler Reddick came into this race 5 points ahead of Austin Dillon for the final playoff spot. He beat Austin Dillon in stage 1, finishing 4th, while Austin Dillon finished 9th. I don't think either driver collected any stage points in stage 2, and actually Tyler Reddick beat Austin Dillon by a few positions at the end as well. So now Tyler Reddick has a 15-point lead over Austin Dillon. Both RCR drivers have put together very solid, consistent seasons, but because we've had so many surprise winners like Eric Almirola a few weeks ago, Michael McDowell early on in the season, they're both vying for one final playoff spot. And again, we still have Daytona in a couple weeks, which could shake things up completely. So those RCR drivers battling for a lot right now. Let's take a look at the top finishers and discuss some more of these drivers. Great day for Hendrick Motorsports, obviously, but if you look at that top 5, it really just proves that you need a good car, obviously at a road course, but great drivers are what really, truly make the difference. Larson, Elliott, Truex, Busch, Hamlin, you could make an argument that those are the 5 best drivers in NASCAR today. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I ranked my top 10 best drivers in NASCAR today, and I think 4 of those guys were in my top 5. So say what you will, I think Hendrick Motorsports gave those guys some good race cars, but it takes great drivers to get the job done on road courses. And fortunately for Hendrick Motorsports, they have 2 of the best in their company right now. I'm still curious to see if Hendrick Motorsports still has that dominant speed at the intermediate tracks and other ovals on the schedule, but when it comes to the road courses, as long as you have Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson on your roster, you have a shot. So a good day for Hendrick Motorsports and for Joe Gibbs Racing. Christopher Bell just a little further down, he still rallied to finish inside the top 10. He has been surprisingly good at road courses early on in his Cup Series career. Good overall day though for Joe Gibbs Racing. All of their drivers inside the top 10. Chase Briscoe, Kevin Harvick, decent days. William Byron, another solid top 10 as well. I'll mention this really quick. Bubba Wallace finished 23rd. The reason I mentioned Bubba Wallace is because Michael Jordan was at the track today, and I want to give Michael Jordan some credit. When it was announced that Michael Jordan was starting a NASCAR team, I did not expect to see him at the track as frequently as we have seen him this year. He was at Pocono a few weeks ago. I know he was at least one other race earlier in the season. He's been at several races this year, and the same goes for like Pitbull at Trackhouse. These celebrity team owners who we don't typically think of as NASCAR personalities, they've shown up at the racetrack to some surprising events. I just wanted to mention that because that is really important when NASCAR is trying to appeal to new fans and audiences that may not consider themselves racing fans. If big recognizable names like Michael Jordan are really in, they're all in, they're at the racetrack, they're heavily invested both financially and personally, I think that's going to relate to new audiences in a big, big way. So not a great run for Bubba Wallace. He's not a great road course racer. That's not surprising, but very cool to see Michael Jordan in attendance. And speaking of attendance, one final note, they announced this was the, I believe, 6th straight grandstand sellout at Watkins Glen. So really, really cool. I noticed watching from home, watching on TV, there still seemed to be some gaps in the stands, so maybe the fans were all hanging out on the hillside or something, or staying in the shade. I have no idea, but they at least said it was a grandstand sellout, so I guess that's a good thing. Good stuff out there at Watkins Glen, but there you have it. Those are your top finishers. Now only 3 more races to go until the playoffs begin. Now the last order of business in today's video, we got to put this race on the groovy gauge. Part of me is in a good mood because it's great to see NASCAR back. Another part of me is in a good mood because I felt like the Truck Series race, despite it being shortened by weather, the Xfinity race was fantastic. Even the ARCA race, probably the most stacked field ARCA has had in years. I'm in a good mood because all the other racing this weekend was pretty dang good. Today's race was no exception. I thought it ended a little anticlimactically. If Chase Elliott had really been able to get to Kyle Larson, oh boy, that would have been special. Just the fact that Elliott alone made up 7-8 seconds in 18 laps, that alone is incredibly impressive. But late in this thing, Kyle Larson really seemed to have it all but locked up for a long, long time. So the finish was a little anticlimactic, but the battle between Truex, Bell, Larson early in stage 3, the early drama with the Penske car spinning out from the lead in stage 1 and stage 2, there was a lot to like about today's race. I thought NBCSN with their radio style broadcast was solid. I will say post-race coverage left a little to be desired. The race today was only 2 hours and 11 minutes. Like, there weren't a whole lot of caution flags, so it definitely felt like a fast race. Watkins Glen races are usually pretty quick, but 2 hours and 11 minutes, I did not realize it was that short. I liked it. Again, I believe all races outside of a select few crown jewels should be 2.5 hours long, roughly, and I think 2 hours and 11 minutes, I'll take a short race every now and then. But this race was 2 hours and 11 minutes long, and NBCSN still only showed about 6 minutes of post-race coverage. Like, we never even got to see Kyle Larson pull his car into victory lane before they were already cutting to the IndyCar race, the Music City Grand Prix, which you're probably watching maybe as this is coming out, or it might have just ended by the time this is coming out. I'm gonna have it on in the background as I'm editing this video, so I understand big event NBCSN wants to get there soon, but like, this race got done so quickly. I'm shocked they cut away from it as quickly as they did. I would have liked to hear from a couple other drivers, or at least see Kyle Larson in victory lane. So other than that, I thought NBCSN's coverage was very, very solid. Racing was good, hard to pass, but not as hard as it was in 2019 with those big rear spoilers. So I'm going to give today's race at Watkins Glen a very, very solid 80% on the groovy gauge. Not incredible, not amazing, but plenty of drama, some great storylines to follow. And while it looked for a while like Kyle Larson was going to run off and hide and win this thing easily, Chase Elliott was just fast fast enough to keep things somewhat interesting in the closing lap. So 80% for me. Let me know down below what you guys would make of today's Watkins Glen event. That's all I've got for this episode. Whew, I feel like I kind of just bounced all over the place. I got to get back into the habit, into a rhythm of sorts when it comes to these post-race review episodes. I'll figure it out in time for the playoff side, rest assured. But thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode. That's all I've got. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR day in, day out. News, rumors, predictions. Sometimes we have interviews like with Martin Truex Jr. a couple days ago. We also talk about races and have race recaps like today. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your support. Plenty to talk about later this week, and I want to talk more about that Xfinity race yesterday. Ty Gibbs continues to stun the world with the sheer amount of raw talent he has. We'll have to talk about that some, as well as all the other news and notes from around the NASCAR world this week. So I will see you all again very, very soon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.